All right, good evening. We're going to get started here in just a second. I know we have our community members who are tuning in online. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. Really quick to do some introductions while everyone gets settled. My name is Allie Snell. I'm the Associate Director of Alumni Engagement here at Southern New Hampshire University. I'm also a proud alum, got my graduate degree here in 2009, and it is my pleasure to kick off the first in our series of the Business Indicator series for the fiscal year 2020. So we're really excited to kick this off tonight with an exciting event featuring one of our own alumni, Jim Naro. But before we introduce Jim, I just would like to introduce a few other colleagues we have joining us here tonight, and we'll hear a brief word from our sponsor. So before we hear from our sponsor, the Letty Group, I'd like to introduce Deb Golatino. She is the Associate Dean for the School of Business in SNHU's Global Campus. Deb joined our team in March of 2018 with 25 years of human resource leadership experience at the C-suite level, so we're very lucky to have her. She's completed 4 strategic HR redesigns in the healthcare systems, ranging from employees of sizes 1,500 all the way to 3,700, and has over 18 years experience teaching in higher education. Deb brings great passion, enthusiasm, new thinking to the development of HR professionals. In addition to a Master's of Nonprofit Administration from Western Connecticut State University, a Master's in Organizational Leadership from Grand Canyon University, and graduate education in HR Development and Research, Deb holds the designation of Senior Professional in Human Resources. That's an SPHR. Deb is also one of the founding faculty of the soon-to-be new Bachelor's of Science in Human Resources. We are very excited to be offering that online with SNU's Global's campus, and I know Deb's going to be talking more about that in just a moment. We are really happy to have her here, and we are also excited that you can join us. As a reminder, the Office of Alumni Engagement, we host programs like this throughout the year, both in person here at the Manchester campus, across the country, in any one of the regions where we have high concentrations of alumni, students, staff, and faculty, and of course online for those of you joining us. So again, it's my pleasure to introduce, before we kick it off the event, I'm also happy to introduce our sponsors. We can't do this work and we can't have one of the foremost staffing organizations in Northern New England. So thank you so much, Jessica, and thank you to the Letty Group for their generous support.
Thank you so much, Allie. Thank you so much, and I'm pleased to be here, and I'm even more pleased to be here because I'm sitting next to one of my former colleagues tonight. So you don't get to do that very often, and it's just fun to connect. So I have been with the Letty Group and Work Opportunities Unlimited, our parent company, for 15 years. I started as a recruiter and then moved into our division of Letty Group, and I'm now in staffing. My specialty is human resources. So guess what, Deb? We're going to be talking afterwards. Sounds good. It's all about connecting and networking with Letty Group. And what we do is we partner people, candidates, who are looking for jobs with great employers that are looking for candidates. So there's nothing better when I get to do that, when I get to extend a job offer, change someone's life in both ways, the candidate and the employer. So we have different specialties. As I mentioned, human resources. We also have accounting and finance, executive admin, customer service, office support, engineering. So many times people don't think about a staffing company when they're looking for another job, but many times we have great direct hire opportunities that you wouldn't have had that opportunity to look for. So that's a little bit about Letty Group, and we're a proud sponsor. We have been since the inception of this program, and we're about giving back to the community, and we're happy to be here. So thank you very much.
Can you hear me? Oh boy, that's good. So I'm Deb Golatino, and yes, I want to recruit all of you to get a bachelor's in human resources. We'll talk about that later. But the very first thing that I want to do is just tell you how exciting it is for me to be here tonight and to meet all of you. You're going to learn some really interesting things about yourself, things that you can use in your organization, and you can use in your own career path. Jim and I talked a little bit before knew we were coming together, and I said to Jim, one of the things about myself is I always knew what I wanted to do. I never, ever had a question about it. I'm not sure why that happened to me, but I kept that very clear about myself so that every single job decision I made it against the things that I knew about myself. That's really important for you to do and for you to hold on to as you go through your entire career. So we have a very diverse community here tonight. I know we have current students, both online and on campus. We have fellow alumni. I know some of our colleagues are out in the online world. And it's really great that you're all here together. Predictive analytics. This is part of what you're going to do tonight, such as psychometrics, is emerging as a key influencer in the way that you're being hired. Employers are using the kind of data that Jim is going to talk about tonight to make decisions about whether or not you can be a key influencer in their organization. So what I was really happy to learn is that there's a lot of students here who are at some certain points in their career. So being able to understand who you are in the world that you want to build is going to be really important. Because what employers are looking for, and I talk to them all the time, especially as I'm out there trying to build a bachelor's in HR that's going to be a good experience, I talk to them all the time, and you know what they say to me? Deb, we want employees who are ready as soon as they step in the door. And in order to be ready as soon as you step in the door, it's not always about the technical skills, it's about knowing yourself. And one of the things that Jim is going to teach you today to think about and to take with you is that you're going to want to always bring your best self forward. Right? Keep that. You agree? That's cool. Okay. So if you know that about yourself, you're going to have a long and successful career in whatever you pick. So Jim Narrow earned his MBA with SNU in 1985. He's currently an adjunct faculty at SNU and a sales leadership consultant and predictive index certified talent optimization partner. Don't make me say that again. Okay. Before starting his consulting business, Jim spent 20 years in technical management. He told me he started his HR career in HRIS systems. I started it in employee relations. We came at it in different ways, right? Sales and sales management, executive leadership positions for technical companies in the Boston area, including Wang Labs, BBN, and Covad Communications?
Covad, yeah.
Covad, okay. During most of his time in the corporate world, he was involved in digital networking and had the opportunity to work on teams in the early stages of deploying private and public data networks, including broadband technologies and kind of the internet as we know it today. At SNU, Jim teaches with great passion an undergraduate course focused on leadership and professional sales, as well as coaching and mentoring students in the sales program. In addition, I know that Jim has great passion for learning about people and having people learn more about themselves. He also has a BA from Purdue University where he studied psychology, philosophy, and pre-law. I'm glad you didn't do the law thing. And pre-law.
Me too, yeah.
And one of the things that he's learning is, why are you learning ballroom dancing? Is there a reason for that?
It's great.
Why not, right? Yeah. So I think what Jim is going to bring to you tonight is have you think about yourself as that talent person, right? That person who's going into that workforce, who's going to bring your best self to that particular employer, and you're going to do it at every step of your engagement in your world of work. Without further ado, I'll hand it over to Jim.
Thank you, Deb.
Wow. You're welcome.
What a great opening. That was awesome. I sound like a great guy. Huh? So, what's that? No, I'm not going to. So here's the story. I had to prepare for this tonight, and then we have a recital on Saturday. I got to do triple swing and rumba. So so this week has been like So by the way, I want to welcome everybody streaming out there. I can do my best John Oliver, I guess. Welcome, welcome. So what I want to get to today, and I'm really glad there's a lot of students here because I have my students in my course actually take this behavioral assessment. We talk about it in the hiring process, so I'm really glad that Deb brought that up. And more companies are using behavioral assessments in their hiring process. So it's good that you take the assessment and that you understand it and that you also understand yourself. So one of the things I want you to think about is we're going to uncover your behavioral story. Okay? Does that make sense? So all the people who were able to take the assessment, what you can see there is really your behavioral story. And by the way, for students that weren't able to take the assessment, when Allie sends out the follow-up to this, she's going to include the link so that you can take that. And I really would like you to take the opportunity to take that assessment. All right? By the way, I forgot to thank Christy Durrett for introducing me to Allie and then inviting me to do this session. I came to one of these sessions maybe 5 years ago, and ever since then I've been involved as an alumni with the school and got involved in the sales program. So a little bit, the title of this talk is about your passion and finding your fit. And it was interesting because Suzanne was telling me that she loves finance. And she looked at her assessment and said, it says that I don't like detail. And I said, well, that's, the point is, no matter what you're passionate about, there's work for you for whatever you're passionate about doing, all right? And it's just a matter of finding out where you fit in that world, okay? Whether or not it be finance. What are some of the interests that people have here, some of the students? What are some of the things you want to get into? Anything? Law? I can't help you there. Get away from that. But certainly law, there's, different, this stuff that's real detailed, right? But then there's also discovery stuff. So there's all different kinds of behaviors or profiles that map over to law. Could be corporate law, right? It could be litigation. There's all kinds of things. Some law that requires a lot of research and so on, all right? Does that make sense to everybody? So that's the first thing, because people come to us and say, well, I want, career guidance. Start with your passion. No matter what it is, there's probably going to be some work in there that your behaviors, what drives you, will fit, okay? On the flip side, and I'm not sure how many people we have from corporate America here, but on the flip side, when you're building a business strategy, you got to decide what the work is going to be and how effectively you define that work and then match people to fit that work will determine the performance of your organization. So those are the two sides that we're going to come from today. Does that make sense to everybody? And when you see at the end, we'll pull it together and wrap it up. But we're mostly going to focus on the individual. So as Deb mentioned, I got an MBA from Southern New Hampshire University. It was actually New Hampshire College. I probably should have put 1985 up there, so everybody knows 1985. Yeah, I know. So I got my MBA in 1985. A year after that, I ended up going to a company called Boparanek and Newman. This was 1986. And the gentleman that was hiring me called me up and he said, Jim, I just have one question. I said, what is it? He goes, do you have a master's degree? I said, yeah, I do. I have my MBA. Turned out that was the difference of me getting that job and not getting that job. And that's the job that I had for almost 13 years, and it was the job that I loved the most, okay? And that's the job that allowed me to grow and ultimately get involved in internet working and deploying internet technology in New England and then internationally. It gave me the opportunity to start a business with a team from $0 to $1 million, and then set up an organization that eventually grew to $1 billion. It was just unbelievable experience, and I loved it. So that's the good news. The bad news is the internet became pretty well known, all right? So what happens, who owns the internet today? Who runs the internet today? The telephone companies. So we got bought by a telephone company. A company by the name of GTE out of Dallas, Texas. Huge company. So they bought us because all the telephone companies were buying internet companies to get into the internet business. And I remember the first time I went down to what they call Hidden Ridge. This is a 1 million square foot facility in Texas, in Dallas, Texas, right, outside of the city. 1 million square feet. Do you know how many people worked at that facility? 5,000. So think about that. That's the phone company, right? Regulated, tariffed, huge. Well, here I had had this experience with a startup, and over 13 years growing, all kinds of opportunities. Well, so we get out of the meeting, we come back, and my boss, his name was Ralph, told me that because of the acquisition that I wasn't going to be doing some of the things that I've been doing. And I'm like, okay, well, what am I doing? He goes, well, here are 3 projects that you can do. And I looked at them and I was like, oh, I don't want to do any of those. I mean, they were all like things that were not, that important. And it was like, wow, okay, so what's going on here? And I said, I'll tell you what. I had built out the New England region sales organization. I said, how about if I take my region back? He said, no, we can't do that. We've acquired another company, which is called Genuity. You might have heard of that one, I'm not sure. Because that ultimately became the name of the company in the end. And he goes, we have multiple layers of management, so that job is going to be taken by someone else. But we don't want you to leave. And I'm like, okay. This was the first time I really felt emotional about a job, and I just wanted to quit. But I couldn't. We just moved into a new home, went from so many square feet to more square feet because we were doing really well. Had 2 kids, so I just felt trapped. But I was surprised by my emotion that I was willing and ready to quit my job. Think of the responsibility I had. I was like, wow, where did that come from? I was just, okay. So after a little while, there was another gentleman I worked for. His name was John. He had actually already left the company, went out to California, because everything was happening in California. It was around in San Francisco. Actually, he was living in San Jose. He actually left and gone to Cisco Systems. Everybody's probably heard of Cisco, pretty big company. But ended up joining a startup company called Coviai Communications. So we went out to lunch one day. He had come back to the East Coast, and he invited me to, guess what, build out the New England region, build out the whole network, the sales organization. And I'll tell you, I was gone in a flash. And it was a startup. It was very risky. So the reason why I'm telling you this story is, first off, maps back to SNU, all right, and how I got into that, which ultimately changed the trajectory of my life pretty much forever. And everything I learned in that business enabled me to go out and do consulting and so on. But thinking back and kind of connecting the dots, I didn't have a behavioral assessment at the time. I didn't really understand myself as well. So Deb, kudos to you for knowing yourself. I don't think I quite know myself yet, but I thought back and I was surprised by my willingness to take the risk, to go to a startup, pre-IPO. I was really surprised by that. I was also surprised by, I needed to put my thumbprint on things. I needed to see results. I never really thought about that before, but that was really important to me, all right? The other thing is loyalty. I felt like, I had been loyal to the company, and all of a sudden, they didn't return that. So, and that was important to me. The other thing is, I liked implementing change, but I didn't like change if I didn't understand why things were changing. So here I was in a situation where things were changing, and I had no control over it. All right? Does that make sense to everybody? So what I'm sharing with you is my behavioral story. Had I had an assessment, I would have understood these things. The other thing, too, is I left the company, all right? And my boss, Ralph, was told that I needed to be there, to don't lose me, make sure I took a project that I'd be happy with. So I left the company. He got brought up to the CEO's office. Actually, it was the CEO and president, Paul. And he was reprimanded because I left. But it's like, what do you expect? So they threw a big party for me. I was really surprised. It was, I had been there for about 13 years, so I knew everybody in the company, so it was a big turnout. I didn't think I was that big a deal, all right? I just didn't think I was that big a deal. So what I want you to think about tonight is a couple of things, or a few things. First is, there's a way to measure kind of our behavioral story, and that's called the behavioral assessment. It's a psychometric or whatever. It's a way of looking at things that we can't see, but we can actually measure. So I just want you to understand we can objectively develop that behavioral story of yours, okay? And a lot of you have taken the assessment, so you can see that. The next thing is, what you can do with this is you can gain insight about yourself, right? Gain some self-awareness about how you're going to react in a situation similar to what I was in, okay, where there might be some pressure. And the other thing I want you to think about is being empowered to take more control over that. Not only your response, but also having some empathy and then managing and dealing with other people. Right? Does that make sense? So that's really kind of the arc of what I want you to get out of this session today. Okay? So that said, you're happy to know I'm not going to talk through this whole thing. I'm going to have you do a little exercise to kick things off. And for the people that are watching us on the streaming, you should have received this as well. So you can do yours. Unfortunately, you won't be able to share it with anybody. So the directions are right on the exercise, but I'll go through them quickly. What I want you to do is go through and put a check mark next to those items that you really enjoy and find satisfying to do at work. And then I want you to put an X next to anything that you really don't like, right? And you don't find satisfying, kind of the things you don't like to do, okay? Now, if you don't have any feeling one way or the other, just leave it blank, all right? Does that make sense? And then once you're done that, I want you to put an asterisk next to the thing you enjoy the most, and then write down why you enjoy that the most. And then once you're done, I'll kind of get a heads up for everybody, and then we'll have you share those at the table. The good thing about this exercise, it doesn't matter if you took the assessment or not. If you're a student, that's work too. yeah, just detail work, heads down, no communication with anybody, no interaction. Whatever you feel it would be a long period of time. Yeah, yeah, good. So if you like to do everything, you haven't had a bad job yet. What's that? You forget about them, yeah. Okay, how are we doing with that? Everybody got that done? So why don't you pair off, in this case you might need to do with 3 people, and share with each other, find something that you have in common, and then something that you differ about. How was that exercise?
It was interesting. We've known each other for 45 years, but now we're trying to find out what do we do together.
We're totally 2 different people, actually.
No,
Well,
we
we did
same
pretty
on the
good,
first
yeah.
line.
But we could almost guess which ones we actually
know.
Oh, that's too funny.
So if you have X's, tell me that you have X's on here, then that's things that you good at work with.
You really don't want to do. Yeah. Like,
Working in a meeting and organized meeting. I put it out.
yeah.
I put check.
I don't want anything to do with other people. That's the
Yeah,
problem.
really? People are pain.
See, I went to school to be an elementary school teacher, but I really, if I would have come back in my life, I would have stayed with finance.
Yeah.
I like to play with numbers
Yeah.
and, not deal with too many people if I didn't have to.
Oh, that's too funny.
And they're exactly as expected of me. Would you put?
Oh, good. You're promoted. Okay. Not too different. Yeah. They're both social. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, as you start learning to chunk these out. So, good.
From a different point because I'm at a company that regulates supplements and vitamins. So they have to implement change. It's almost like a but it's a compliance thing at the same time. That goes against the shareholder. So I hedge that one. You like the fact that I'm
He's a rule breaker. Yeah. Oh, good. So you need some controls on your behavior here? Yeah.
But I'm also the one you hire without even interviewing.
Why is that?
Captains.
Oh, yeah.
Captains and Mavericks.
And Mavericks, yeah. Well, definitely captains. Yeah.
If you see this, you don't even have to interview me. Just hire me.
And especially, well, the captain with the cutback D is what people, yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, you want more of an angle.
Yeah.
I'm a flat
That increases the liability insurance. All right. So let's go over here. How was that for you guys? Any insights from you guys? Hit the students first, no insights. What you like, what you don't like. It fits into your majors. Oh, that's good. Okay. So that says you're on the right track, right? Good job. How about over here? Any insights, comments? Yeah. An X. So you guys work together and you let her do all the detail work. And that's the beauty of teams, by the way, right? If one is an X and one is a check, hey, team them together. Okay. There's a woman I know that I had her do this, and she's in inside sales, so you would think very social, but not really. And she does a lot of sales training and implementation, enablement, planning, and all that. And she's teamed up with someone who's much more social, who does all the delivery of the programs. So one doesn't care for the detail, the other one does. As a team, they're fantastic. So how about over here? Anything you guys find? Oh, okay. Yeah. Interesting. So the questions are a little more ambiguous, so subject to interpretation. Yeah, good. And how about you guys over here? Actually, you guys had a pretty spirited conversation.
No way.
Yeah. Yeah. Did you find anything when you went through this exercise that was similar? Okay, so a creative look. Good. Excellent. All right. So let's go into, we're going to follow up on that exercise towards the end, and you'll see what we're linking it to. But I'm going to jump right into the drives that we're measuring. So this is kind of the theoretical model that we're using. So the assessment that you took is based on this model. I'm not going to get into the science of it. For those people who are really into data and information and you want to know about the science behind this, just send me an email and I will send you a 17-page description about the science behind this, okay? Anybody with degrees in psychology, psychometrics? Okay. You probably already know this anyways, but if you want the PI science paper, I'll send you that. So what I do want to say about this slide is, first, these are the factors we're going to be talking about. And don't worry about the names and understanding. We're going to go through each one, and we're going to define it. And what's really neat is I got a little vignette for each one with people in it behaving in a certain way. And that way you can actually see the behavior, and then we'll discuss it. But what I do want to say about this model is that we all have these different drives, okay, that ultimately impact driving our needs as well as our motivations, and then ultimately our behaviors. And then we've named them with these names: dominance, extroversion, patience, formality. Extroversion is probably the most typical one. Everybody decides whether or not they're an introvert, an extrovert. But it's almost like people walk around and like there's only two types of people, introverts and extroverts. Not really true. We're a little more complex than that, all right? So I want you to understand that we have all of these drives, but because it's based on statistics, we actually average across the drives. So you see an average norm in the center, and then we have sigmas on each side, 3 sigmas on each side to gather the population. That's as technical as I'm going to get on that. The way I want you to look at it is it's a volume. all right? The drives you have can either be high or low, right? And that's how your behavior is going to be expressed, okay? Does that make sense to everybody so far? All right. I do want to take a moment to talk about what this does not measure. This does not measure skill. It does not measure experience. It does not measure intelligence. It does not measure your ability to learn. There are actually other instruments that will measure those things. So the beauty of this is it's very simple. And if you all remember, how long did it take you to fill this out? About 5 minutes, right? So that gives you an idea of how focused it is. The other thing is you probably realize how accurate it is as well. So the science behind this is what I call scary accurate. But we're only focused on these things, okay? But I think that you'll find it'll be very powerful in helping you as you move forward in thinking about what drives you. All right, so, whoops. Sorry, I didn't get what the message was. So let's start with dominance. And we have a brief definition, which is drive and exert an influence on people and things. Essentially, this is what we're going to call the idea channel. It's how we generate and value ideas. All right. If we're high in dominance, it's all about your idea. My ideas are right. Okay, that's just a way to look at it. If you're lower on dominance, I'm open to listening to other people's ideas, a little more collaborative. Does that make sense to everybody? Does that make sense to you guys, since you know about this, right? So let's watch this video, and then we'll do a quick debrief after.
Do you have a moment?
Not now, Marie. It's crunch time. I got to get these catalogs out by the end of the day.
Do you have a moment?
Oh, no problem. What's happening?
I've got bad news. Long Beach is down. The power went out in the middle of their run.
No, this is going to be a nightmare for those poor customer service people. What can we do to help? What? All right, we got to come up with some options, and fast.
What are we going to do?
Why don't we ask Charlie? He's in charge there. He'll know what's happening. We can rent some generators, or we can send everything to our San Diego shop. Or even better, we can lean on Thatcher Press. They owe us. Well, Charlie, he'll probably tell us there's nothing we can do until they get the power back up. But we've got to do something. I'll call the client. Maybe we should think about giving them a discount on this job. Thatcher will just have to come through for us. If we don't get these catalogs out today, we'll look like idiots. And Ames is too big of a client to lose. This will work.
All right, let's talk about these two gentlemen. Let's go with Jerry first. Tell me something about Jerry. Just some quick description about Jerry. What's that? High in dominance. What's an adjective you would use for Jerry? Hair on fire. Yeah. How about over here? What's an adjective you would use for Jerry? Arrogant? Ooh, ouch. Don't some people with that high drive seem arrogant sometimes? Oh, it's all about your ideas, huh? What else? Be non-approachable, yeah. Why? Because he's generating all the ideas. I don't need to add anything in, right? He's just... So Jerry is kind of what we say, take charge, right? So what about Bill? What's that? Collaborative. Yeah, gather up some ideas. What other people think? It's not just about what I think, Good. Extroversion, the drive for social interaction with other people. So the other way to think about this is, you ever do problem solving with someone who's very sociable? What do they want to do? Yeah. I'm jumping ahead a little bit. Let me run the vignette, okay?
I hear the summer menu's going going to have a theme. What's that all about?
I called some of our best customers to see if they'd like a theme for the summer menu, and they said yes. What they'd like is fresh, light food, so that they can stay healthy and fit. Nothing at all heavy on the menu.
Could you give me some specifics? I hear the summer menu is going to have a theme. What's that all about?
We've been talking about it, but honestly, I don't think we need a theme. A menu is about the food, so I'm going to see what new things our local farmers have to offer.
Could you give me some specifics?
Well, there's a guy growing lots of exotic veggies, like spaghettiello. I could build some really creative dishes around them.
I will, but first I want to call some more of our regulars and bounce a few ideas off them, see how they'll react. I want to make sure that the menu works really well for them.
What are you hoping for?
I'd like our summer menu to give people the feeling of like a spa where people get together to feel good.
Just great food. I'll call my purveyors and I'll get to work.
Okay, how about this side? Alison, what did you see? Tell me about Alison. What did you observe? What's that? Reserved. Sure. That's a good one. Yeah. What else? Less ideas? Really? Say that again. Less ideas that she expressed. Interesting. Okay. How about over here? Yeah. She has a plan. What about her plan? It's her plan. Controlling. But remember, there was a creative piece in there. Yeah. I want to create something. A little more reflective, right? And what about Kate? What's that? Yeah. What was she going to do? Socialize. Let's talk about it. I want to talk about it. I'm going to call all the customers. Did Alison call any customers? Hey, I've just researched what's going on, you know, these exotic things, blah. I'll call my purveyors. No need to get customer input, right? By the way, we don't do shaming here. We're just different styles. We're trying to accentuate them. We say no pattern shaming, all right? But Kate, the other thing too, the way to think about this is it's also a way how we solve problems, okay? The higher B, I'm going to socialize. I want to talk it out. The lower B, I need some time to think about it. All right. By the way, this is an area where you have a little more flexibility. So, and I kind of also want to dispel this whole introvert, extrovert. Just because someone's quoted introvert doesn't mean they don't do extroverted things, right? There are plenty of introverts that get up in front of groups and speak and so on, okay? So that happens. The difference is where people get their energy, all right? Extroverts get their energy from other people, where introverts get energy from their own thoughts and thinking and reflection. The other thing too in the workplace, and this is where you get into more of the application if you're actually using this in your environment like you guys are, is if you want to do problem solving with someone who's high B, you don't tell them on a Friday afternoon because they don't really care. They're not going to think about it. You tell them first thing Monday morning, hey, I want to meet, or just walk in their office and start, kicking around some ideas. Whereas someone who might be a lower B, if there's some problem solving or something you want them to think about, you might want to say on a Friday afternoon, hey, over the weekend, I'd like you to think about this. And then when you come in on Monday, share your thoughts. So give them a little more heads up. Does that make sense? All right. That one's kind of an easier one because I think everybody's used to talking about introverts and extroverts. But clearly people are not just two-dimensional like that. We all have these drives going on. So this one's interesting too. This is patience, the drive for consistency and stability. And this one's kind of a fun one too.
Michael, a fax just came in from Ray in Singapore.
We want to start distributing our Jupiter line.
We've never had an Asian distributor before. This could be very interesting.
Do you want the details right fast?
I already know most of them because last week on an impulse I called Ray. We threw a few ideas back and forth. It's about time he got back to us. I was about to give him another call.
A little later, sure. The thing is, I don't know if we're ready to take on Asia yet. I mean, we've got a good thing happening here without going international. The system's working for us.
What do we do now?
Well, I'll get on the horn with Ray right away. It's a huge market. And if we play our cards right, we could have a contract by the end of the week. Let's give production and packaging the heads up they need to get cranking up quickly as soon as we say go.
Let me think about it before we answer Ray. Domestic sales are increasing steadily. That's reliable. But if we start distributing in Asia, there's no telling how that could affect things. A lot of companies go down the tubes when they try to expand too fast.
So what do you think about Michael? Risk taker. What's he got in his hand? I know these are probably older videos. It's like, I want to take a note and, right? Multitasking. I called someone on impulse because that's what I do. I got all these things going on, right? You can even see it. He's all hunched over. He's typing in. Do you have coworkers? You go in their office, they're typing in, they're on the phone, and and they're driving down the road. Any other comments about Michael? All right. So what about Paul? What did you see with Paul? A little more cautious, put the brakes on. We're not necessarily going to associate it with risk, but more about change, right? The other thing is, if the lower C's, change is fine. Just bring it on. We love it. Multitasking. Higher C's, let's wait and see. Do things in a serial fashion. Let's get this done, and then we'll try something after that, right? Does that make sense? Any other observations? I'm kind of leading the witness here at this point. Yeah. 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 And there could be a process too. Because what we find is that pattern is more process orientated. All right. So the last one that we're going to talk about as part of this model is formality. And this has to do with conforming to rules and structure. So this is more about risk, by the way. The lower Ds are a little more risk tolerant, higher Ds a little more risk adverse. But I'm getting ahead of myself again.
All the furniture we make is for mid-market and below. But what about aiming higher at the executive suite? Sleek designs, exotic wood.
What do we know about sleek designs and exotic woods? We've already got 3 lines of chairs and 4 lines of metal furniture. That's what we're good at.
All the furniture we make is for mid-market and below. But what about aiming higher at the executive suites? Sleek designs, exotic woods.
I think that's a great idea. We'd be opening up a whole new market. It would be a breath of fresh air for us designers.
Do you see any problems the new line would create?
I'm sure there'd be some, but nothing we couldn't solve.
There are always problems with new products. Getting suppliers for the woods, retooling, changing the workflows. We haven't even perfected the lines we've been working on for years.
So what's the bottom line for you?
Why not? It's always better to be bold. Targeting the executive suite is just the jolt of energy this company needs.
I favor improving the lines we already have. People buy our furniture because we take care of the details. When we get everything right, then maybe we can work on the fancy stuff.
So let's start with Denise this time. Tell me about Denise. What did you guys see with Denise? I haven't gotten any input over here yet. Okay. Chicken. risk adverse, right? What about over here? Any comments about Denise? Doesn't want to change. Pessimistic. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. What else about Denise? Cautious. Did you hear about getting it right? Let's get it right. Okay? Let's follow the rules. Let's get it right. Much more conservative. Whoops. And how about Catherine? Compulsive. Shooting from the hip. Yeah, let's just go. Proactive. I like to shoot from the hip. Hey, if something goes wrong, we'll fix it. No big deal. We don't have to be right. We just have to do it. Let's just do it, right? Little more risk tolerant, right? So those are the drives. That's kind of a high level. Does that make sense to everybody, right? I mean, these are things we see, but what we're trying to measure is what's underneath the hood, okay? Going back to my story, so I'm a little bit higher on the A, need to put my thumbprint on things. I didn't realize how that would manifest itself till it did. A little bit lower on the B, but I can move back and forth. But I am a little more creative, ended up in technology, because I like new ideas all the time. I get bored with, which is kind of interesting because I'm a higher C. I like familiarity. I like working on a team for a long period of time. I've only had 3 jobs in my professional career. One was for 13, one was 6 years, and the other one was after IPO. So 3 jobs, that's it. And now I've been a consultant for almost 20 years. So I like familiarity. Even though I like this, things change, I like new things, new ideas, creative, but I do like familiarity. I've moved 4 times in the same ward in Nashua. So, which is where I grew up, turns out. And as far as formality, a little bit relaxed on the rules. I'm okay, I'm very flexible. So I'm a lot more casual, risk-taking. So that really showed up when I made that decision to leave a company I had been at for 13 years. So that drive really kicked in, and it really manifests itself. I was surprised. The funny thing is, I did have this assessment done in 1997. It's exactly the same as the assessment I just did in 2018. The thing is, I wasn't using it for self-awareness. I wasn't using it to think about my behavior in my own behavioral story. So that's the whole purpose of this session, is to help you guys, get a leg up, especially the students. All right, so let's talk about your behavioral story now. And for all the students who, if you're just using a John Doe profile right now, I think I already mentioned this. When Allie sends a follow-up, she's going to send a link so that you can take the assessment, and I hope you take advantage of that. That's our gift to you. But let's talk about you now. So in your assessment, you get the report, and you see these 3 images on the report. And one is called the self, one is called the self-concept, and one is called the synthesis. So what I want you to do is write down next to the self, DNA, all right? That's essentially your natural style. If you were to say your steady state, if there's no pressure on you to change one way or the other, this is pretty much your natural style, okay? So next to the self-concept, I want you to put 90 to 120 days. So what your self-concept is how you may be stretching, right? Like an elastic band. how you may be stretching based on what demands are being placed on you in either your current work environment, it could even be as a student, all right? Things that you're doing that you may not naturally want to be doing or being driven to do. Does that make sense to everybody? Now, let me ask you, is that a good thing or a bad thing? It is. Depends. How much are you stretching, right? What happens when you do stretch? I was going to pass these out to everybody and have you hold it like this. Say, how does that feel? Yeah. You hold that for a long time, it starts to take up some extra energy, right? Versus just leaving it like this, no energy. So you just want to be aware that if you are stretching, that you're burning extra calories to fulfill the work activities that you're currently doing. That's all it means. In some cases, it may not really be something you can do for a long period of time. That's where you can potentially get burnout, all right? The closer you are to your steady state or natural state of your DNA, the more willing you are to do that, whatever it is, work activity, for a long period of time, all right? And that's the will do, and you will do that, and you'll do it for a long period of time. I forgot I was going to ask you to write can do and will do. So in these behavioral assessments, we're really measuring what you will do, okay? Going back to the distinction about what we don't measure skills, we don't measure intelligence. And there are plenty of things you can do. I took accounting as part of my pre-law, and whenever I got an answer wrong, they threw it out. And they set the curve based on anything I got wrong, they threw it out. I'm not an accountant because I hate it. I hate the detail, so I didn't become an accountant. It turns out, though, my wife is an accountant. She doesn't like detail either, but she's a cost accountant. She's not a bean counter. She's really a detective. So it's different. All right. Does that make sense to everybody? Any questions on that? Now, as for your own self-awareness, this just reflects your past 90 to 120 days, and certain things will change. And what we do for our clients is we're going to give them the option to measure this like every 6 months or so they can see, how people may be stretching themselves at work. Then we look at the synthesis. All this is a mathematical combination of yourself and your self-concept. All right? And what you can write down here is behavior observed in the past 90 to 120 days. So this is actually more what people see. Okay? Now the other interesting thing, so recruiters, what do you see when you're interviewing someone? Yeah, based on the PI. If you don't have a PI, what do you see? You're seeing the synthesis. Yeah. Now you could have really good behavioral-based questions that will give you some insight into what might be driving their behavior. But the reality is, at the interview, you're seeing the synthesis. And then what we say is, on day 91, that's who shows up on the job. So if they're not close to what you were looking for and match the activities of the job, that's when you might have an issue. So I say that for people that are hiring, but also for students that are going to be looking for a job, because I think there's a little bit of a challenge with organizations that sometimes they put a lot of activities in a job that, probably are conflicting with each other. That does happen. So they try to put 10 pounds in a 5-pound bag. So if you have that self-awareness about the activities that really drive you and that you match up with, I think that'll help you better, look at the jobs that make sense for you, okay, and also interview for them. Because ultimately what's going to happen is when you take a job, your performance is going to be managed based on the requirements of that job, all right? And if there's a mismatch, there's going to be issues for you and the company. Does that make sense to everybody? All right, I have no more props. That's it. So what I want you to do now is go back to the checklist that you had and look at your profile. And I know if you have a John Doe profile, it's not going to really work, but hopefully you'll do the assessment later. But look at your profile. Does that make sense? Do those two match up? So is what you checked off things you like make sense given your profile? Of course, now you might want to revisit some of the things that you checked off and say, oh, maybe I wouldn't want to do that. And that's okay too, because now you think more seriously when you look at a job description and see, are the things they're asking me to do things that I really want to do? Make sense? Any comments on that? Anybody see anything striking? Yeah. So did you pick things that were consistent with a promoter in your job activities? So one thing I will share with you is we have an assessment tool that enables you to create job descriptions based on the top activities that you believe are important for that job. And guess what? That's the assessment that you just did. All right? So you see what we have here is not only your behavioral assessment, but also the assessment of the job. And the way to think of it is the behavioral assessment is your foot size, and the job assessment is the shoe size. All right? Does that make sense to everybody? I kind of like that analogy. Okay. So what's the point of all this? We're going to kind of come back and tie it together. The reality is that job requirements, there are demands of the job, behavioral demands of the job that really matter. So if you're looking for a job, you become aware of your own behavioral story. You know, when you're looking for a job, regardless of what industry you want to be in, the passion that you're following. And by the way, I'm assuming you have a passion, especially the students. If you don't, that's okay too. But at least find something that fits what I would call your behavioral story. So this should make you more aware of yourself. And if you're looking for a position, you know how well your behaviors line up with that position. If you're a manager or an organization, think about being more mindful now about the job descriptions that you create. What activities are really important for that job? And do you have activities that are conflicting? In fact, do you have a job description? I know for a lot of sales organizations, I read a job description, you got to do so many outbound calls every day, blah, blah, blah. Then you got to build long-term relationships with customers. You got to make sure the implementation is done and all the detail is done. You can see where there's starting to be a conflict now. And you're probably not going to find that person because they don't exist. All right? So maybe you're going to end up having a team. So as you can see, how well you define the work that gets done can impact the performance of your business. So we got a couple of slides left. This is a more kind of what's going on in the industry, to go back to what Deb was talking about. Companies are getting more focused now on job descriptions, job fit, also making managers more aware. There's this thing called the golden rule: do unto others as you would want done unto you. We've changed it to the platinum rule: do unto others as they would want done unto them. Because you may want something done in a certain way, the way you get feedback or the way you do work. I'll give you a good example. If you're a low C, if Deb's a low C, and there's some change coming up, I just tell her, because she doesn't care. Whatever, okay. I'm ready for it. But if she was a high C, I would have to think about it. All right, change is coming. I know Deb needs to understand why. I got to explain it to her. Also, I might want to get her involved because, high Cs, they like to be involved in implementing change, right? So I might change how I deal with Deb if something is coming down the pipe. that make sense to everybody? So we have self-awareness of the manager as well, but then also starting to build empathy with people that work for them. Think about your worst boss and your best boss. Have you had a worst boss and best boss? Yeah. And tell me about your best boss. I don't want to hear about the worst boss. What about your best boss? Fair, honest, trustworthy, got your back. Yeah. But also, they get me. They understand me. I remember, I can think of the best bosses I had. They understood me. You know, they really figured me out. Some people are good at that. Others aren't so much. I have to admit, I'm not as empathetic. You got to kind of hit me over the head, you know. I don't mean it. I don't mean it. By the way, I use this. So I did one of these for my wife. And of course, I have to hear all the work stories. So I did one with my wife, and she was always complaining about, you know, so-and-so came in, didn't say hi to me. I said, really? Okay. So we did her profile. She said, hi, B. Now, you got to say hi to Karen. Got to say hi. She's telling me that I'm a low B. I said, you know, you walk by my office, say, I don't really care. I just don't care, right? But in the workplace, these little things, you know, you got to think about them. So anyways, you have that awareness as a manager. I think it'll be helpful. And for you now to start thinking about these more objective descriptions about behavior, what drives needs and motivation and ultimately behavior. Hopefully, I think you can see will help you as well, empower you in dealing with people problems. Not only your own problems and issues, but also people problems in general. Because I think people kind of back away from them because, you know, people are very complex and so on. But I think there are some basic things that you can learn, some basic people skills you can learn. And then ultimately, you know, there's a cultural thing here as well. How well do you fit in the culture? Those are things you can take into consideration. And then as well, team dynamics. And the reason why I bring that slide up is, you know, you can work good on your own fit and awareness and maybe have a good manager, but you could still be at the wrong company. So be more purposeful about culture. And I think, especially millennials, I think are looking at culture more than I think we probably did when we were looking for a job. I know when I got out of school, I just wanted a job. I just needed to make money. So no real high aspirations. Although I did come to get my MBA. And then, of course, team fit as well. So what I wanted to say earlier, I forgot to mention, I wanted you to write it on that exercise. There's can do and will do. And all the can do is around, you know, your experience, your education. And then the will do is really based on your drives, your behavioral drives. Will you do it? Will you do it for a long period of time? And the way we put it is this your highest and best use? All right. If you're in that kind of job and you're aligned with that job, you know, it's Friday afternoon and you're saying, man, 2 more days to work. God, I can't wait to get to work. All right? That's when you know, right? That's what Christy does every Friday. David, I got to get back to work. That's right. Why do we have these weekends? They get in the way. Yeah. So, I know you have a balanced lifestyle. Otherwise, you're getting to have to, and again, for corporations, you know, this is going to impact engagement and ultimately productivity. So, that's pretty much the end of the arc that I wanted to give you. I have a last slide, which is, you know, fixing engagement problems is possible when you understand behavior. What I'd like you to take away from this, so here's your assignment. You now have your profile. If you don't have your profile, your assignment is to get your profile, do the link, I'll send it to you. Keep that exercise of things, decide what you like to do, what you don't like to do, then you have your profile, and use that to figure out what you want to do in life, all right? And whatever your passion is, look at the different jobs that are, you know, in that area. My son is in film. He knew he wanted to be in film ever since he was in junior high school. Well, actually, I think it went back to elementary school. Very creative guy, musician. Well, he's a documentarist today. He's a cinematographer. there are some parts of the job I know he doesn't like, but he's so passionate about what he does. And it's just amazing. So if you can start doing that and then finding your place, your landing spot. My career may sound wonderful, but there were some tough, there was some grind in there. I had to pay my dues. And I think had I known, had a little more focus, I could have made it easier. Not that I would switch it out. I think the only thing I've ever said that I would have done different is I would have gone to work for IBM. But I think that's the only regret I have. So, and if you're running an organization, think about how you define the work for that organization and how the way you define that work fits into the strategy of your organization, right? So if you get that right, hopefully you can attract those people that are passionate and want to do that kind of work. And to me, that's going to be the best thing to pull together, is if both sides are actually working to define things correctly for themselves and then for their organization. All right? That's all I have. Thank you very much.
So I just want to make one comment and then just see if there's any questions. Those of you that are students at SNOOS, we have rubrics, right? Please don't talk about those. So think about this as your personal rubrics. It's defining you, defining some elements about you. And as Jim is saying, when you're going out and looking for jobs, have your rubrics right there and have a job right next to it, right? That's the way you want to use this. So just something to think about. Questions. What kind of questions do you have? Do you have any questions?
Excuse me.
Just raise your hand if you have any questions. I'll bring the mic around.
Sorry, I just quit like that. I meant to say, oh, yes, and we'll transition to questions.
It's all right.
Good catch, Deb.
Any questions? Yeah. Oh, you go. Okay. I'll stand this.
So on the test, you explained the A, B, C, and D, but I also see an E at the end. And
oh, thank you. Oh, gosh. Very
yes.
good. Very good.
I'd appreciate.
So I knew I was going to forget the E drive. All right. And this is a nit. It's actually not a test. It's just an assessment. Because we do have tests. And tests, you got to prepare for, and they're very stressful. So this is, we try not to call it a test, but I know. Yeah. But great question. I'm really glad you asked it. I would have left without even covering that. So that drive, interesting is, they might add it in as a fifth, but it is, the reason why it's put in where it is because it's part of yourself and your self-concept. All right, that's where it's calculated from. So in that, the E drive is when you do make a decision, what do you base that decision on? So if you're high on the E drive, you base your decision very objectively on facts and data. And the way to think about it is you come into looking at data without any thesis, that you let the data tell you what's going on, all right? So very objective. Does that make sense? If you're to the left, it's more subjective, based on experience, intuition. This is that gut feel. This is my gut feel, all right? So the funny thing is that same gut feel is there when you're right, and it's the same gut feel it's there when you're wrong. Right? But that's just how you make those decisions. So, an interesting point is, if you look at the D drive, that's really also about collecting data. It's like how much data you need to make a decision. By the way, when you start to drill down, these things all interact with each other, so it gets a little more complicated. So the fact is, you could be, if you're more risk adverse, that means you want more data, so you typically have a higher D. And if you're less risk adverse, then it's typically a lower D. Interesting thing is, I have a high E and a low D. So I'm all about information and data, but I don't have any issue with risk. And I don't need a lot of information and data. And I'm very objective about my decision making. All right? I usually don't go gut feel, very objective. And unlike my wife, I don't socialize the decision. She's got to email the kids, you know, you want this, like, no, we're just going here. Yeah. Very good, thank you. That was very important. And I would have missed that. Yes. It's almost the same. Yeah, it's very similar. The bigger difference between DISC and what PI is doing, and it's interesting because Marston and Arnold Daniels, who came up with the PI, were actually working together back in 1955. And then they kind of split off because, so I have Marston's book at home, so it's all based on the factors. That's where it all started. But then how they measured it became different. And the big difference is in the DISC, you have to compare two things and say, am I this or am I that? All right, everybody got that? That's DISC. PI is just go through, stimulus response. Things that you think describe you, no comparison, very quickly, boom, boom, boom. It's also less, it's almost like when you're comparing two things, it's like, well, am I this or am I that? Whereas when you just get the stimulus response, it's you're much more open. So.
Plus the other thing about DISC is it focuses on where you're working at that particular point in time and the role that you're in, right? So you could take a DISC, 10 years ago, and it's going to be maybe different than the DISC that you're taking now. I'm sorry, we have a question.
I actually have two. At the beginning of the presentation, you had mentioned if we were interested in finding out more about the predictive index, we could find out more. So I'm curious how that would work. And then number two is, I'm not sure what a Rubik's is. I didn't know if you could touch upon that.
It's an education thing.
It's an education thing.
I only
Let's
learned
leave it
about
at
it
that. I will tell you about it, but let me get some other questions. Other questions?
Well,
no, you're just
so
fluffing
you can
the
just
hair.
contact
Okay.
me and I can.
All right,
I can
we're good?
direct you. Yeah.
We're good.
That's it?
Yes,
Very
and
good.
thank you. Just one more round of applause for Deb and Jim. And I just want to say, for those of you who've been tuning in online, we did have one final question, and I think we'll connect Jim with the questioner, but the question is there a list of jobs that may benefit each particular behavioral index? I'm guessing like categories.
Yes, actually, the predictive index is, and I'm not going to remember the name of there's a government site that has a bunch of job descriptions. I think that's what it is. And they're going to match behavioral assessments to jobs.
Great.
So they're going to do that, and Predictive Index has millions. They've done millions of assessments, and they have a lot. They've actually done validation studies as well. So for customers, for example, they've done validation studies on sales positions. So they have a lot of that information, but they are going to map it to that job bank.
Great. So it's the ONET job bank, onet.gov. And of course, if you want to connect with Jim or Deb, you can find them easily on LinkedIn, and we'll be sending that out with our wrap-up email tomorrow. So again, thank you to everybody who came out tonight, who tuned in online and had a chance to participate. We really appreciate the opportunity for you to take this time and think more about what drives you and really how do you find that fit in the job and in any workplace environment that you find yourself in. So thank you again for coming out tonight. Thank you to Jim and Deb and to the Letty Group. Have a wonderful evening, and we'll see you at the next Business Indicator Series event.
Thanks.